Okay, good evening. It's going to be a little short little live stream tonight. It's not going to be the longest. We'll aim for about, I'd say, an hour. So we're done by about 20 past 9. Lots happened today in sport. Lots happened. We'll look at the Premier League results quickly. I think Wolves holding Man City to a draw. I'm not surprised by that because of what they did last year in the League Cup and forcing Man City to go to extra time last season. Arsenal beating a West Ham 3-1. Very important for Arsenal to finally get a win. Unai Emery, there was a few rumblings of discontent after they didn't get the win they needed in the first couple of weeks to get the win. Good. West Ham, more problems there, still winless. This is taking longer for Manuel Pellegrini to get this side to gel after the amount of money they've spent. They've broken their transfer record this season, West Ham. They're taking longer to get this team to gel. Bournemouth Everton, pretty solid from both sides, to be honest. Huddersfield, good response after the heavy defeat of Man City, holding up Cardiff. You never want to lose to a promoted side in any league. Southampton, a bit concerned about them. Leicester, good response considering they had a player sent off, and Jamie Vardy in the previous games. He's suspended at the moment, so that's a good win for Leicester. That's a couple on the bounce. And Liverpool beating Brighton 1-0 is good as well. Hello, Mr. Sean Avery. How are you doing? So we're looking at the results today in the Premier League. I would think Man City aren't looking as invincible as they were last season. But I'm not surprised by the Wolves result. Wolves did do a number on them in the League Cup last year, really frustrated them and held them to a draw. That's why I thought Wolves, out of the promoted sides, they looked the most solid, and they've added. So that's the one that doesn't really surprise me. The surprise for me, though, I think is West Ham still without a win or without any points at all. That's got to be a concern for Pellegrini and the ownership and the fans. If West Ham need to get a result soon. We've already seen, obviously, Scunthorpe sacked their manager yesterday, and he's only been in the job since May, and he wasn't given till the end of August. I don't think West Ham are going to sack Pellegrini, but there is problems there. It's not working out for whatever reason. Pellegrini's a very good manager. He's good at making teams better. He's won the Premier League before with Man City. They have spent a lot of money, and I don't want this whole short live stream to be about the Premier League today, but it's good to have a look at the scores. We're now nearly a month into the season, so we can have a fair idea of where teams are headed. And in years past, the transfer window will still be open for these clubs to add something. I'm looking at Southampton here losing, and there's concerns that they may be struggling again this season. Brighton, a great win last weekend, beaten by Liverpool. I see Liverpool as challengers to Man City. They currently top the table. Arsenal getting that win, crucial. Rumblings of discontent with Arsenal fans. We're only a couple of games in. It took 3 games for them to get off the mark, but they got off the mark and they won well. Huddersfield and Cardiff. Cardiff have actually struggled so far. They're not really creating enough, and they need to. I know they're promoted and they're the weakest of the 3 promoted sides, but I'm a bit concerned about Cardiff long term. Everton and Bournemouth, 2 solid mid-table sides at the moment. Bournemouth have grown each year under Eddie Howe, and I think they can aim for top 10 again. I think they could possibly be in the sniff or a European space for next season. Everton, I think the amount of money they've spent, they've got to look at what's going on there. Watford play tomorrow, and they've got a 100% record, so they're going to be interested to see if they can peg Liverpool back. There's some surprises so far, and some not so much surprises. Hello there. So yeah, we're going to keep this as a shorter live stream tonight. We're only going to be on till about 20 past 9 my time, so hour. But I'm looking at the results of the football, but also the Challenge Cup final today in the Rugby League, and the fact that Catalan Dragons, who only came into existence 15 years ago, when 2 French clubs merged to form this team in Perpignan, they've made a piece of sporting history. First non-English side to win to the Challenge Cup. The first French player to win the Lance Todd Trophy in Gino today, the Catalan fullback. And the way they started the game in the first half, and the way they started the second half, they deserved quite rightly to win the game. The second half was chaotic. I think Warrington went in there heavy favourites and maybe a bit overconfident. They looked shell shocked for the first 10 minutes. And there were periods in both the first and second half where Warrington just did not look themselves, overforcing the pass, overforcing the play, trying too hard. The shame about this year's Challenge Cup is it's the lowest Challenge Cup final crowd I think since just before World War II. Catalan Dragons only brought 4,000 to 5,000 fans from Perpignan and the south of France. A prohibitive travel costs is one concern. Club Wembley ticket holders got a lot of the allocation, who would maybe not even be rugby league fans. Travel, whereas it was an issue for both sets of fans, a lot of empty seats. The whole top tier was sealed off. So that didn't look great for TV. You could see a lot of empty seats, even in the areas that had fans. There's been concerns about how they could get to it from the ground with issues at Euston Station. So that's not a good advert for the Challenge Cup, even though it was highly entertaining. And it wasn't the most skillful final. It was poor quality final in the sense of the actual play scene, but the entertainment value, it was really edge of the seat stuff. And when the play was good, and when Catalan and Warrington got it right, they looked pretty good. I think Catalan were heavy underdogs. They had the moral support. There was a lot of neutral fans in the stadium today. Again, they were supporting Catalan. A lot of the final tickets were bought up by neutrals because the two clubs obviously were given an allocation, and then Club Wembley members got an allocation, and then it was open to anyone and everyone. But it is a shame the game didn't sell out. I think Catalan fully deserved the win. I think looking at and how they played and looking at the action points, and there's quite a lot of action points. And yes, the video referee was used a lot in this game, and did it overshadow? I think for the most part, yes, the video referee got it right. The disallowed try for obstruction, you can debate the obstruction rule as much as you want. It's currently what the rule says, and that is actually the correct decision, even though it may seem harsh or wrong. And that was a turning point early on. And we can still argue the obstruction rule. Does it need updating? Not a lot of the players necessarily agree with it. Not a lot of the fans necessarily agree with it. But as it stands, that is what the rule is. But no, honestly, it was a very good cup final in the sense it was exceptionally entertaining, which I think is what it needed. But I'm free to take questions and go from there. But before I take any questions, the NFL helmet rule and what they brought in from March. It's interesting. Both rugby league and rugby union, as I mentioned in the video that I did earlier today, have also had these experimental rule changes or these new rules coming in to govern the tackle area and the safety aspect of the game. And some of them, including like the crusher tackle and the neck roll rule, have been in now for several years, and penalties, large amounts of penalties, are still being given even now against players. Players have to adapt their tackle style. We will see, what the penalty count is. Is there going to be a spike in penalties? We're seeing in pre-season that the penalty count isn't great. It's not bad, considering that 33 pre-season games have been played. So you can debate, how important this is, but it's more of a safety issue. The issue that I have with it is that incidental contact with the helmet on any part of the player's body, even if it's not intentional. It's that unintentional contact. It's not a foul. It should be. Hello, Saeed. How you doing? So there is that kind of debating point there, and the lack of the use of replays is a slight concern for me as well. So it means a player could actually go away with a dirty hit and actually not be caught there and then, get away with it, and the next phase of play goes on. So there's that. If we look at the cricket, because Saeed's now popped into the live stream. Massive cricket fan. Oh yes, I'm not saying it's the best quality test series, but India definitely in that third test showed why they're the best team in the world. I think the issue is why it took them 3 test matches to adapt to clearly changeable conditions. Obviously, if the Test series had been played slightly earlier in the summer, the conditions would have been a lot different here in the UK because we had a very hot, dry spell, which lasted better part of 2 months of basically drought here in the UK. And the weather has suddenly got a bit cooler, well, a lot cooler the last few days, a lot more rain, higher winds, more changeable conditions. I am surprised it took the Indians 3 Test matches to fully adapt to those conditions. The first test was a nice even test match, I felt. Second test was a complete and utter mess on the part of India. Third test match, they allowed England to have too much fight in the second innings. I think both sides have had really appalling fielding, really bad with the catching or the dropped catching, the lack of catching, and some of the captaincy decisions by both captains intrigue me in the sense that I'm questioning why they are making said decision. So Joe Root, there's a lot of questions over his captaincy. There's a lot of questions over the current selection policy and the current coaching setup with England. On the Indian side of things, is Virat Kohli 100%? He looks like he's got a slight back injury, and Ashwin looks like his hip is really had it. I do think Alistair Cook has been favoured far too long at the start of the order. I think possibly dropping him should have happened as soon as he decided to relinquish the captaincy. There have been times in his career early on where he was dropped, occasionally when he was younger, and it did him good. He's basically been a constant for too long. He hasn't been threatened with the axe. I'm not saying this player's played crap for a couple, just drop him. No, I always say give players a chance, but Cook has been there for the better part of a decade, if not more. He's been captain before. I think you're looking at Stuart Broad and Jimmy Anderson. Jimmy Anderson's his last full Test year. He's going to pass McGrath's wicket totals for a fast bowler with ease because obviously we're playing Sri Lanka this winter. But I think next year is his last full year of Tests. I think he'll probably retire in a year's time. Stuart Broad will then be the experienced bowler in the lineup. And I think Stuart Broad is far too expensive as a bowler. He's the most expensive for runs against. Stuart Broad has got some good figures, and he's got over 3,000 Test runs as well. I think 4,000 Test runs, and over 400 wickets. Not many players can say about that, but I think he's not as effective as he was a couple of years ago. I'm not sure if Stuart Broad's fully fit. The selection policy of the Ben Stokes side of things, I'm not sure how big a news it is in India with the issues surrounding Ben Stokes and his trial and all his legal issues. But recalling him to the Test side that quickly and in place of Sam Curran, I think was a mistake. We could debate, is that derailing? And he is. He's still in the squad. He's definitely not been dropped from the squad. I think Chris Wokes and Sam Curran. Chris Wokes didn't play well in the third Test as well, but his performance in the second Test and Sam Curran's performance in the first 2 Tests, I don't see why taking confident guys out or adjusting their role in the lineup is the right way to go. I think you've got to look at Ben Stokes. The last 12 months have been a shambles on all parts. The ECB have mishandled it. Ben Stokes is obviously, the video footage of Ben Stokes is there for all to see. So you as a cricket fan will see that and be aware of it. Alex Hales doesn't cover himself in glory. He seems to have disappeared off the Test scene. They're both going to be facing an internal ECB investigation, which won't happen until this Test series is over, which I think is bizarre. I think the ECB need to discipline these players or investigate them for what happened that night, regardless of the Court of Law decision, because there is a culture issue within the dressing room, clearly. On the selection point of view, I think it's a fudge. I really do think that they're really fudging it a little bit. They're not being consistent in anything. And some of these young players, their confidence will get severely knocked. I think there's too many all-rounders in the team, in around the squad. There's too many. You've got Wokes, Curran, Stokes, and Moeen Ali. And I would say Rashid as well. I would say Rashid, if he puts his mind to it, because he can bat a bit, put him as an all-rounder. His fielding needs a lot of work, but we have too many all-rounders in the squad. I think the max you should ever have in a test side is 2 or 3, really. Not as many as what. I'm not disputing their quality all-rounders. I mean, Moeen Ali, I think, is fatigued. He has played a lot of cricket, and it's probably why he's been dropped from the test side, but he's still in the test squad. Rashid, yeah, he's an all-rounder. He's not the best fielding, but batting and bowling, he's effective. So we've got 5 all-rounders in this current test squad. I think that's 1 or 2 too many. And looking at the batting collapses that England have had over the last few years, I think maybe they're the wrong type of all-rounder. Maybe you need more of a Jack Callis type of all-rounder who's more solid at batting and bowling than fielding. Maybe we don't seem to have that. But no, Sam Curran and Chris and Wokes and Curran have played very, very well in this Test series when they've been called upon to do what they've got to do. I think Ben Stokes. I think what's going on with Ben Stokes is clearly overshadowing and distracting. I think some of his teammates. I think Joe Root doesn't come across to me as a very strict captain or a captain that is authoritarian or has that kind of authority kind of figure. He comes across as too nice and too soft. I think he's not a safe pair of hands. He doesn't seem to have that intimidation factor or that leadership quality. He seems just to be there because he's an ECB yes man. I think he's in there because Alistair Cook stepped aside earlier than the ECB were expecting, and they were obviously clearly grooming Joe Root. But who was the vice captain under Cook then? Who's part of that leadership group? Because to be fair, I think that's another weakness in the England setup is Root and some of the leadership core around him. Ben Stokes has clearly failed as a leader, and Joe Root is not allowed to go play in the IPL next year. The ECB have said they don't want him to play. I think that's wrong. There's a lot of debating points over the England side at the moment, and where the selectors go. I mean, we've got a change of, but also as a captain, he's making a lot of bizarre decisions when it comes to field placement of fielders. It's not just Cody's getting runs and not. It's you've got to look at also when you're fielding and all the bowling side and the fielding side. Some of his field selections in the first test, most of Cody's boundaries and runs came from third man. Didn't put a fielder at third man, so Kohli was basically had a free rein to score in that area. And had they had a third man there, he would have scored less runs or been forced to take shots that he didn't necessarily want as much. It was far too easy for Kohli to get 200 odd runs in the first test and 200 runs in the third test because some of the fielding decisions by Joe Root, where he placed fielders, were bizarre. Some of his best slip fielders were not fielding at slip. So you've got to look at some of his field placements and the drop catching as well. A captain should, and the coaching staff, their leadership group, they clearly are not working hard enough, although they're overcoaching that part of, let's work on this, and they're overdoing it, and it's making players snatch at a catch or maybe they're overtraining too much and they're tired. I don't know what it is, but since Joe Root's been captain and since Bayliss has been coach, three 10-wicket batting collapses in a day. I think 2 have happened in a session in 2 years. You don't win test matches when you lose all 10 wickets within a session's play or a day's play. You just don't. That says to me that there are serious issues behind the scenes. But it is good to see that Wokes and Josh Buttler have got their maiden test centuries. It's good to see Sam Curran getting his maiden test 50. So, yes, there are some bright sparks around this England side. But India in the third test did prove why they're the best team in the world by a long way. They are far, far better than this test series says. I think the first test was very, very close. Either side could have won that test match. I really do. But that second test, they were humbled, and then they reversed it. They reversed it on England. I don't understand why we've got three wicket keepers in the side. I really don't understand that. I know Bairstow was injured, and having Josh Butler as an experienced keeper helps. And Ollie Pope is young, and it's good for him to learn, I suppose. He's in this side for his batting, and he has played well in the field. But again, that says to me that there's an issue with fielding depth outside of wicketkeeper. Because why have you got Josh Butler? Because when he's been playing in the slips, he's been absolutely hopeless with catching. He either catches it or he doesn't. And Ollie Pope he's been moved around various bits of the inner field. But why have three keepers in the same starting 11 is bizarre. Two at a push, yeah, I can see that when you look at South Africa with AB de Villiers when he took over the wicket keeping role eventually towards the second half of his career. First half of his career, he was a temporary wicket keeper. He would come in and play the odd game with the gloves on, but by the end, he was the keeper. I'm all for an experienced player having an understudy around the squad. I'm all for that in the same role. It doesn't matter what sport you're looking at. It doesn't matter, if you're talking rugby, football, cricket, ice hockey. It's always good to have an understudy around the experience of a senior player. It's always good to have a blend of youth and experience, because the young players can learn from the older players, and the older players can also give that little bit of stability and guidance when the younger players are a bit more extrovert and aggressive in their play. It's good to balance it out. I think this is a very, very, very interesting squad, because I think some of those more experienced players are, I don't know, the fact that you can have specialist slip fielders like Alistair Cook. When they're not playing at slip, it makes no sense. What's the point of having Alistair Cook on the boundary? He doesn't have that kind of fast bowler pace that you would expect for a boundary fielder. Joe Root is making some interesting captaincy decisions, like when Rashid was bowling at the end of India's first innings against India, took a wicket and they take him off. When Kohli was struggling all over the place, they took Rashid off. Really bizarre. But we can debate the finer points of having, three keepers in the side at the same time. I think Bairstow will probably not be 100% for the next test. I think Bairstow's hand injury has had more of an effect than people realise, because he was named in the batting order in the second innings. I think 4 or 5. Came out, I think, at 7. And you could tell as soon as he took guard, he wasn't comfortable holding the bat. Bowled first ball, and a ball that very, very easily defendable. All he's got to do is put bat on it, aim the ball into the ground. That's all he had to do, and he was just, stumps were skittled, and he looked like he just didn't want to be out there. So I don't see Bairstow as being fit for the 4th test. I think Josh Butler will start with the gloves. I think Pope will be in there for his batting. They've added Vince to the mix, and he's a form guy at first class level, but he's regularly failed in the test side. He's been dropped twice before. This is his 3rd call up, his 3rd time lucky. I think he does get a bit of unfair criticism, but I say this: some players are really good at club level and first class level, and they take that step up to international level, test level, and just don't do it. It happens in multiple sports where some players are better for their domestic club side than their international side, and also vice versa. Some players are really, really good in the international side of the various sport they're playing and really average at club level. Vince is one of those players who's very, very good at first class county cricket, and he takes the step up, and his batting average halves. His batting average is half of what it is at first class level. So I don't understand. You then have a little bit of drop off as a batsman with your batting average at test level. It happens. You're playing against a better quality of field and bowler, but by half, that's a real concern. That maybe nerves, maybe he doesn't quite fit in with his teammates. There could be a multitude of reasons why he struggles at test level. Multitude of reasons, but it's interesting to see. It's an interesting one. I've done a video on it. I've looked in depth at his recall. I did my favourite cricketing 11 as well, and that's interesting. I think spin bowling needs to really evolve quickly. There's not enough good spinners at Test level left in the game. You can be a spin bowler who's really good at T20 or one international, take a step up to Test level and be smashed for 4 and 6 all the way around the ground. But Bairstow's injury is one to watch. I think Kohli, we have to see how serious that back injury is, because he's clearly not been 100% throughout the Test series. And Ashwin with the hip. I think those are the three serious injuries or the injury concerns that both sides have. We know Bairstow's got a broken finger. We know Ashwin's got a hip flex injury. The big one is Kohli and how fit he is. Jennings, that's Vince. That's the reason why Vince got called up, and I think Jennings. It's a strange one with these players. I think there's clearly a confidence issue in the top order of England. The middle and lower order, their runs per ball or balls per run or whatever it is, they're actually getting better strike rates. The middle and lower order are getting better strike rates for England than the upper order on an average Test match. That shouldn't be the case. And some of the younger, less experienced players are the ones bailing them out regularly. Curran, Wokes, to name but two. Josh Butler has had his critics at Test level, and he's proved them wrong. They shouldn't be the players bailing you out regularly. They're there to be exciting and to chip in with the runs. They shouldn't be carrying the innings or saving the innings all the time. It's good experience for them though when it comes to an Ashes series or to a series against Africa or the series against Sri Lanka, other good sides down the line when you're developing the team, that they can do a job when needed. But too many batting collapses. They're too much of a regular thing. It's like a repeat of the 1990s, which I remember with horror. England would regularly have a batting collapse in Test series. We've done against the West Indies in the late 90s. We did it a lot against Australia. We did it a few times against Africa. And it took until about 2001 for England to work out and balance the side and get the side right and get the right players in place. And one of those players that was part of the transformation was Mark Ramprakash, who's currently the batting coach. So a lot of the responsibility falls and is on Mark Ramprakash for some of the deficiencies of some of the players. I do think Keaton Jennings is having a struggle. But I'm so surprised people aren't calling, more people are singling out Alistair Cook for failing as well, because it's all well and good changing his opening batsman, the opening batsman, and changing his batting partner. But he's also part of the problem because he's also not performing. If he is doing a Ganguly, he should have gone ages ago. He might bounce back in the fourth Test. He might play really well at the Oval and then win the series. But at the moment, he could cost England the series because he's not getting the runs that are required from a batsman of his calibre. There was a time when Sachin Tendulkar was being questioned when he didn't get his hundreds, when he wasn't getting that century that people were demanding of him. And he worked on his game a little bit and he eventually got it and achieved a Test record that's amazing in batting. But no player is undroppable. No player. But Cook's still part of the English cricket establishment in a way, ex-captain. I think he still has a leadership role within the dressing room. I think that's part of the problem, is that players, some players seem to be undroppable. No one is undroppable. Every player is droppable at some point. Yes, I'm really happy with Blackburn's start to the season. I mean, I haven't caught the scores yet. I've only looked over the Premier League scores because of the Man City result and they're being held by Wolves. But no, we're up to fifth. We're normally slow starters in a league campaign. It's the best start to a league campaign we've had in 20 odd years. I think 25 years. So I'm very happy and I'm content. I'm not expecting miracles this season. I think we have to, temper expectations. Back-to-back promotions is very, very hard and can be actually more of a hindrance than a help. I look at teams like Yeovil, who went to back-to-back promotions from League Two to Championship, had one season in the Championship, and then fell back down the leagues very rapidly. I look at Norwich City, who you know, back to back from League One to the Premiership and stayed in the Premiership for several seasons. I did a video on Grant Holt today, and some teams can do it. Fulham did it years ago, but it's exceptionally hard to do, and it's exceptionally hard, to get it right. I'm happy. I think we will stay up. I think we're more than good enough to stay up. The start we've made for the season is very, very good. I think we're already halfway there on the points we need to stay up in the Championship, to be brutally honest. I think there's some very weak sides in this year's Championship. I think there's some sides that really could struggle, and then I'm quite happy with where we've got to so quickly. I think we should be aiming. That's my phone going off, so I'm probably going to be bugged by people to go to the pub. So we'll go for another half hour. But I'm very, very happy that Blackburn are where they are. I think. Let me just check this message because I'm getting messages from friends all round the country and stuff like that. From mates on holiday and things. Oh, go away. I do think it is still very early in the season, but to get a start as we have, momentum can do a lot, and team spirit can do a lot. I think Tony Mowbray is I think possibly the best manager we've had in a while, who's actually can get the players to buy in together. We've had some shocking managerial appointments over the last decade since the Venky's took over. Definitely since the Venky's took over, we've had some really, really poor. Because of the Venky's ownership, we've had, as I say, some shocking managers, and some really, really shocking decisions when it comes to hiring and firing. Now that we've had Mowbray for a couple of seasons, and he seems to be getting the team to go in the right direction, I think we need to stabilise in the Championship for a season or two, and start getting the fans to come back into the stadium and buy back in. I think, hopefully, fingers crossed, the Venky's sell the club to someone who actually gives a toss. No, Steve Keane is not the worst manager, because we didn't always play badly. We did win games occasionally. Steve Keane isn't the worst. No, there have been worse managers. I would go Henning Berg, and Michael Appleton did pretty poor as well. Paul Lambert is a shambles as a manager. We've had, Owen Coyle. We've had a fair few. I would say Henning Berg was probably the worst. I would say Steve Keane, pretty shoddy as a manager. I'm not saying he's the worst what we've had, but I would say Henning Berg was the worst manager we've had. Brilliant that he was as a player for both Blackburn and Man United in his prime. As a manager, he was absolutely shocking. Right, the Challenge Cup. Now, I watched this whole game. It was the lowest attendance for a Challenge Cup since, I think, 1935, which says something. That was before World War II, at the height of the Depression. I'm not sure moving it from Wembley is necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. They're contracted there till 2027, so we've got another 9 years of them playing at Wembley this cup final. Old Trafford hosts the Super League Grand Final, and most of the teams are based in the north of England, so that regularly sells out. I think the fans love going to Wembley as part of the tradition of the Challenge Cup. It's part of the tradition of the sport. But because the majority of players and fans live in the north of England, I think, probably moving it to Coventry's Ricoh Arena as a hypothetical, because in British ice hockey, the playoffs are played in Coventry a lot of the time at the Sky Dome. I think looking at a big stadium in the Midlands or up north may be a better bet, but it's a difficult one, because the reason why there's an issue now is it's played in the summer. It used to be played same as rugby union and football from August, September through to May. That was the old rugby league season until 1995, and then they swapped it. I think it's a difficult one. There have been a lot of negative headlines about Wembley, the new Wembley since it was built, the price of the rebuild, the ticketing prices for finals and matches, Club Wembley, the negativity around that. There's been issues with transport. Yes, there has been a lot of railway strikes and delays the last little while, and Euston Station is out, and they were saying there is going to be travel issues at Euston and parts of the railway line to the north, where you have to get from Warrington. Catalan, they had their own issues. In France, most of the country's on basically holiday, and their flights and accommodation were very expensive, so that kept a lot of their fans away, and they only brought 4 to 5,000. Yeah, the whole top tier empty, which doesn't look like a great advert for rugby league. I think there are multiple issues with hosting it at Wembley. There are but because the Premier League and the Football League season has now started, that limits your options. So that limits you to, okay, what about Twickenham? It's still in West London though. So Twickenham is one of the few stadiums that you could go, right, okay, the rugby union season doesn't start for another month or a few weeks, and the internationals don't come for another couple of months. So Twickenham, there you go, it could be a stadium that could host the Challenge Cup final. Not saying it'd be the perfect solution. I'll just move my laptop a little bit to improve the signal. So Twickenham could be a solution. Then you've got to look at the North and the Midlands. St James's Park has hosted rugby union internationals, and that would be a chance to grow the game in the northeast. There's not many rugby league teams around Tyne and Wear. You could move it there. It's a big stadium. You could look at maybe anywhere in the Midlands, such as Coventry's Ricoh Arena. Problem is the Football League season starts earlier in August than it used to. Another criticism was the gap between the semi-finals and the final being so big. I didn't quite get that. There are calls to move the Challenge Cup to the off season in the winter months, and play the final in May, but then it will clash with the FA Cup, or it'll be difficult. Obviously, maybe play the Challenge Cup after the season, but then you've got the NFL series in London. Oh yeah, there's a massive gap. Plus, there's been a lot of criticisms of playing the Super League season in the summer. It was done so to avoid clashing with rugby union and football when Sky Sports got the rights to the Super League. That was why it was done. That's why the rugby league season became a summer sport, even though it's the hottest time of year, and that's a concern that I have with players getting injuries and health issues. And we've seen so many players get injured. The pitches are harder. It's warmer, so you get more muscle and cramp. Players cramp up, and then more muscular injuries. It's hotter, so players fatigue quicker, and that has a massive impact on their core temperature and their heart and their internals. And there's a lot of fans don't like the summer, and the summer we've just had. I mean, look at the heat we've had this summer, where it's been hitting 36 degrees. It's been dry for 2 months. Pitches were turning to dead dust. I mean, across Europe, we've had forest fires and people dying of heat-related illnesses and hosepipe bans and states of emergency, and playing a very physical contact sport in the height of summer makes no sense to me. It's lethal. But that's Rugby League. England have decided to do that. The Super League decided to do that. It makes sense, yes, because then it does balance out like a transfer market with the NRL. So both rugby union, both Super League and NRL take place at the same time. It sort of standardises it in that sense, and the internationals in that sense. So both leagues are on an international break at the same time. And if another player goes from the NRL to Super League and vice versa, they can still be match ready and go and play. I get that, but I still have my concerns when it comes to playing in summer. I think a lot of people are on holiday as well. A lot of people are not in the country, or if they are in the country, they're not really worried about what's on the telly. Obviously, the World Cup this summer, that's had a massive effect on people getting a little bit. Okay, I've seen enough sport this summer. I need a break. There are so many sporting. I mean, could it be the time of year? Multiple things there. Start the Football League season. We're now seeing the effects of the transfer window shutting early for the Premier League, with players like Claudio Bravo getting injured. So that's having an effect. And Scunthorpe United sacking their manager before the end of August is something that I wasn't expecting. Honestly, I think it's still too early to really make a fair assessment on any one team's chances or prospects. But at the same time, there are some teams, and I'm going to look at the Premier League teams, so that's the scores I've looked at. I haven't looked at the Championship, League One and League Two. I'll have a little look at that as I do a roundup on Monday evening, because obviously we've got bank holiday, so I've got an extra day off this weekend, so I can have an extra day to focus on videos more because I'm not back at work till Tuesday. So I'll do a roundup of Premier League, Championship, League One, League Two on over Monday. But I'm looking at the Premier League, and there's one team that really stands out for me at the moment, and that is West Ham. West Ham, bottom of the league. Massive concerns for West Ham. The amount of money they've spent, the amount of money has been put on that squad. The new manager in Pellegrini, who I rate highly. Something hasn't clicked there. Something is not clicking at that club. Peterborough, yeah, I've heard Peterborough have had a very good start. Obviously, the goal for Peterborough is to get promoted. That's the goal. I think they've got the fan base to do it. It's whether they can survive in a higher league and make a fist in the Championship. They've been in the Championship before and got relegated. But I think they're a club that's possibly too big for League One. Peterborough need to stop becoming a yo-yo club between the leagues. But looking at West Ham, there seems to be a lack of confidence in the side. I think even Arsenal are new manager, finding their feet, a new era post Wenger. They get a key win today. And that relieves some of the pressure on Unai Emery. That relieves some of the pressure on the board for selecting his manager. West Ham, big concerns. That's 3 straight defeats, no points. Other teams around them are getting that first win or that key draw and just starting to get some momentum. West Ham, big concerns. The amount of money spent. We'll have to see how Fulham do. Tomorrow. Wolves, very good point against Man City. I think they're the strongest of the 3 promoted sides. I think last season in the League Cup proved that they could compete in the Premier League when they held Man City to a draw in actual regular time and went to penalty shootout. So they frustrated Man City last season in the League Cup. And they've done so again today. Man City maybe starting to miss De Bruyne there a little bit. I know they beat Huddersfield 6-1 last weekend. Huddersfield, they've got bigger things to worry about. Then they know 9 times out of 10, they're not going to beat Man City. They're focusing on staying in the league and stabilising in the Premier League. But Man City, I think, might be missing De Bruyne a bit more than Guardiola lets on. I think Wolves, they were a good team last year. I think they've invested. Well, they bought half of Portugal, so it's Portugal in the Black Country. I think Liverpool are going to be the side that really challenge Man City the most this season. I think Tottenham's stadium issues are going to have an effect on Tottenham because no one's really sure what's happening with Tottenham Stadium really. On the Peterborough side, yeah, I think Peterborough need to stop being a yo-yo club. They're doing what West Brom did 10 so years ago with the Premier League, going Premier League Championship, Premier League Championship. They need to get out of League One and stay out of League One. I think the ultimate ambition for any team is to get to the Premier League in English football. Obviously, it's still very early in the season. We're only a month in, so I'm not going to say this run can continue. But confidence and momentum and team unity can get you a long way in sport, very long way. I think as long as the fans can keep themselves grounded and the coaching staff can keep the players on a grounded level going, okay, this is the goal, let's achieve it. I think it'd be better if you went up directly rather than through playoffs. Playoffs is too much of a lottery. And we can debate the pros and cons of the playoff system to death. Not just in football, but in any kind of sport, if there's a playoff kind of structure for a trophy or a promotion relegation, we can debate the pros and cons of every system to death. And there is no right or wrong answer. It's just a subjective point of view on that one. Peterborough, yes, they do need to get into the Championship and stay there, at least for several seasons. And then after 3 or 4 seasons in the Championship, then you can look at going up and try to make that next step. There are other teams, though, that I think make it quite interesting at the moment. The relegated teams. Well, we'll go look at the Premier League on this because I can't base on the some of the other leagues because I I haven't really, as it's so late in the season, given too much notice to a lot of what's going on. And normally, I normally go out on. I'll be going out in about 25, 30 minutes to the pub. It's a Saturday, so I'll be going out in a bit. I'm not going to be watching the highlights or anything like that. But I think Cardiff. Cardiff is one of the relegated teams that I think will go down. So yeah, I'm looking at Cardiff as a team that will struggle. I actually do think Fulham will possibly struggle. Won't get relegated, but I think they will be near the bottom of the league. Huddersfield, not sold on them. I think they're in a bit of a struggle. Southampton, Brighton. There's some of the teams I think will be around the scramble to survive. I definitely think Cardiff are going down. They've never really hacked the Premier League. Every time they've been in it, they've really fallen flat. I think Brighton, maybe they got a good win last weekend. Couldn't back it up today against Liverpool, but this Liverpool side is a very, very good Liverpool side. Southampton, I can see them struggling. I think they've got enough to stay up, but I can see them struggling and not really being happy with where they are with Mark Hughes. Minimum they've got to look at is mid-table. I would say 10th. I don't think Southampton are going to get that. I think they're going to be about 15th. But as I say, it's far too early to definitely say this team is going down. But I think Cardiff are looking not great. West Ham have to start getting points. I don't care if it's a draw; they have to start getting points and soon. Because the longer this winless run goes on, and the longer they stay with no points, the tougher it gets. Palace did something amazing last year. No team has survived after losing the first 7 games straight in a Premier League season. They broke some rules there. I think the unwritten rules in the Premier League. They broke some records, but I think West Ham. I'm not sure if I'm not sure if West Ham have enough to get out. I think the issue is though that as I say, it's too early in the season to really get an adequate kind of reading. I would say at least for another, I'll say round or 2 rounds of games. When you get to though the Championship, League One and League Two, because their season starts that extra week earlier, they have more teams in the league. It's a bit more interesting of how things work. But yeah, Cardiff for sure. As I say, Cardiff always seem to struggle. They just don't seem to get it right, the balance right in getting the team right. Very solid Championship sides. They've definitely got the fan base to be a Premier League side, and it's always nice to see the Welsh capital city get into the Premier League. Obviously, at the moment they've got the bragging rights over Swansea and Newport County as the best team in Wales at the moment because they're the highest place. It's an interesting one with Cardiff. They're also kind of likely to be a yo-yo team. There are some issues off the field as well with the ownership. There's been some obviously issues with player retention and player recruitment in the past. They've spent the least out of the 3 promoted sides. They spent more than Tottenham, though. I think everyone spent more than Tottenham because Tottenham have overspent on their stadium. Cardiff's an interesting one. If they do stay up, it will be an achievement. But there's no easy answer with Cardiff. I'm not gonna lie, there's no easy answer. But yes, goal scoring has been an issue for them. But some promoted side, you got to look at every league. You got to look at from the non-league, so the National League, through to the Premiership. We have a promotion relegation system, and this is a debate I have with North American viewers and Australian viewers. Is their league structures for sport do not have this promotion relegation system. They have a franchise-based system or a one league system with then a league below as a developmental league where they can sign players from. So it's a different kettle of fish. But Cardiff is an interesting one. They do tend to not quite adapt well enough to the Premier League. They're a very physical side, no doubt about that. They're probably going to have a lot of red cards this season under Warnock, a lot of yellow cards. They're going to probably be highly penalised for free kicks and fouls. Looking how past seasons have gone with them in the Premier League, they're going to be probably the most penalised team in the league. They're probably going to have the most free kicks, penalties against, probably the most booking. No, Neil Warnock is that kind of old school manager. His style of management technique is dying out, and it has been for quite some time. And our Rangers fan, well done, Stephen Gerrard's start of the season. 10 games unbeaten, 10-game unbeaten run. So that's really good. It's mixing up in Scotland. Celtic aren't having the best start. Hearts are top. Who would have thought that? Hearts are top of the SPL. Rangers are unbeaten in 10, and Celtic are having a wobble. I mean, Scottish football is good and bad at the moment, but that's a good sign that it's getting a bit more competitive in that league. The bad sign is Celtic not making it through to the Champions League group stages and the UEFA coefficient. And we can discuss the flaws with the UEFA coefficient later on. Oh yeah, 10 games unbeaten. Yes, I'm very happy with how Gerrard's doing. Some of his comments in the media and some of his complaints in the media, I don't think are necessarily the best decisions he's made. But for the most part, yeah, no, I think he's doing a very, very good job with what he's got. I think he's invested very, very well. And I think Hearts top of the league, Celtic having a struggle, Rangers unbeaten in 10, Aberdeen in the mix as well. You've got Hibs floating around. That's a really cool looking top five. And Kilmarnock always, in the top six as well. So it's looking more competitive for this season than in previous years. I think Scottish football needs that, but the UEFA coefficient is a problem with Celtic not making it to the Champions League. It's also a worry when your best team in your country doesn't do well in the Champions League. When it gets there, it just gets hammered. Whatever you may think of your rival team, it would be the same if Rangers were to do it. It would be the same if Aberdeen were to do it, win the league, and then get Champions League football. They would get battered, and that is a problem. So Neil Warnock, going back to Neil Warnock, yeah, he is an acquired taste. I think football has moved on. I don't see him having many years left as a manager. What are my thoughts on any team? Oh, to my thoughts on defending a title. It's so hard. The leagues where you see 3 or more titles in a row normally are not the most competitive leagues. They normally have a depth issue where there's only a few strong teams, and then some of the other teams they just don't quite have the depth issue. The NHL found this in the 80s with the mass expansion of the 60s and 70s. When the 80s came around, there were 2 dynasties in the 80s: the Islanders and the Oilers, and that put the league off expanding for over a decade. Since the 90s expansion onwards, it's been different. There hasn't really. There's been a couple of back-to-back wins from 1990 onwards, where a team has won 2 Stanley Cups in a row, and no more than that. But they brought in a salary cap that's had an effect. The league is bigger now than what it was. But when you have a team constantly winning the title every single year, that normally says to me that there is an issue with depth and quality of a league and competitiveness of a league. But it's exceptionally hard to do in professional sport. The fact that Rangers and Celtic have pretty much dominated Scottish football for 30 years is not good. Aberdeen obviously had a brief spell in the 80s where they gave it a go. And that's the 3 most successful sides in Scottish football. That's part of the problem with Scottish football. They need a Leicester City type story to mix things up a little bit. They need Hearts or a Hibs or a Kilmarnock or maybe Aberdeen again to nick the title off Celtic and really mix it up, because then that means all the teams will have to look and go, if they can do it, so can we. And then it raises the level of other teams to go, well, if this club can beat the big boy, so can we. And it puts it in your head psychologically that anyone can do it, and then it makes it more competitive league again. But that's not the only solution that Scotland need to find with their domestic game. If you want to look at a domestic league, and I'm going to finish on this with the La Liga plans to play. St Johnstone, they're always a solid side. They just don't have the money. That's a problem. Is with a lot of the Scottish club sides, they just don't have the finances to buy big name players. And what big name players are going to want to play in Scotland, where half the league season is pretty much lost every year to match postponements because of bad weather. I think moving the Scottish league to a summer league will probably help. But it is debatable what the solution to Scottish football's problems is. But I'm going to finish on this because I'm going to get ready to go out in a minute. I'm going to finish on La Liga planning to take games to the US and the reaction from the players, the fans, and now managers. Obviously, La Liga, and that means the clubs, the 20 clubs, have obviously got the top two tiers, of La Liga, because you've got La Liga 1 and La Liga 2. They've obviously got around the table and they've said, right, we need to sell the game in America somehow. Now, what they've come up with is a media agreement with this media company called Relevant, who aren't very relevant because I've never heard of them, to have some kind of media deal, which is fair enough. You always want to have a broadcast to show your games. It's part of a broadcast deal. It's perfectly fine. Part of the deal is that La Liga has to take regular season games to the US. There's two problems with this. One, the MLS is the domestic league in the US. I don't think they really want to have to share TV time and lose revenue because the big boys are coming in, because they're trying to still grow the game over there as well. And two, the players weren't consulted. Oh, and the fans as well, but the players weren't consulted. So the Spanish Players Union met, I think, on Wednesday. All 20 teams had a representative, or several representatives. Sergio Ramos was representing Real Madrid. And I think Saul of Atletico was representing, or Koke was representing Atletico. And Sergio Busquets was representing Barcelona, partly because he was possibly available to do so. All 20 representatives were the voices of their teams. All 20 voted against. They then came out and said that a strike is possible. And that was the end of that for that particular point in time. Now, Julian Lopetegui, the Real Madrid manager, formerly of Spain, has come out in a press conference before their match today against Getafe and has said that he also supports the players. He also thinks that the plans to play regular season games in the US will not come to fruition. And because he's backing the players, and this also basically means vice versa, he's backing the fans as well, because the fan backlash in Spain has been vicious. And when I did the video earlier today on Lopetegui's decision to say, look, I back the players, I don't think this takes place. In 2007, the English Premier League under Scudamore had the idea, and they came out with this plan to play a 39th league game in the US, where every team would home and away would play an extra game in the US as a game for the season. Very quickly, the Premier League realised that wasn't a very good idea, because a lot of the fans group said, we're going to boycott your games then. If you plan to put this in, many empty seats at stadiums look really bad for TV, and a lot of teams at that time relied on ticket revenue as part of their they relied on ticket revenue more, than they do now with the TV deal. The TV deal was a lot less back then. They relied heavily on the ticket sales and merchandise sales more than they do now, and that would have hit them really hard. So they shelved it. Now, when La Liga a couple of weeks ago came out with their plans and provisional plans, straight away the Premier League questions were asked at a press conference, and straight away said, "Oh no, we have no plans, none." They very, very quickly went very sheepish about what their plans were 10, 11 years ago, which they had at the time, and very quickly said, "No, we have no plans at all." And the Spanish Players Union is threatening a strike. And I can see this rumbling on. I can see a massive split between the players and managers and the clubs and the league. The Spanish FA is now turning against the idea. I think they will. La Liga have signed a 15-year contract. If they don't honour it, they can be sued. and Americans like lawsuits. Um, as far as I'm aware, in football at least, there hasn't been a significant player strike of any duration. There's been threats of player strikes, but there's never been a player strike in the sense that we've had Major League Baseball, the NHL, I think a couple of rugby strikes as well, where the players have gone and we're not playing. Obviously, the most famous are the Major League Baseball and the NHL. The NHL, before their first lockout, had a brief player strike in between the regular season and the playoffs in 1993, I believe. That lasted about 2 weeks, which then the next year led to a strike shortened season, a lockout shortened season in '94. They've had 3 lockouts. The Major League Baseball, I believe, have had a couple as well. They've definitely had a strike, and that was to do with image rights and money. Every time these strikes happened, fans felt that these were rich people wanting to get richer, and they didn't care about the fans. In this case, what Sergio Ramos, all you may think of him, and a lot of people don't like Sergio Ramos, obviously for various reasons. He's actually said that we weren't consulted as the players' union, and that's fair. But the fans are going to lose out, and I think that's fair as well. The players are trying to get the fans on their side early on in this dispute because I think they're going to need the fans when it comes to the player strike, and there will be one. I don't know if it lasts a couple of days or it lasts longer, but I think it's coming, and I think it's going to happen in a lot more leagues. I think the players' unions are going to gain strength. And if it does happen, does that affect the Champions League and Europa League games? Does that affect the international break? Does that mean that the Spanish clubs have to put out their reserves, their youth players, to cover for their first team regulars being on strike? Lots of permutations come out of this. I'll have to look into sports strikes and do a video on athlete strike, player strikes in sport. I know the NHL, Major League Baseball, NFL, and NBA have done it. I know rugby league players have done it or threatened it. I believe rugby union players have looked at this as well. It's never happened in football that I'm aware of. However, I could be wrong. Oh, look, I mean, La Liga have signed a legally binding document with this US media firm. And the US like suing people. They have a compensation culture in the US. Corporate lawsuits can be really long-winded, damaging, and expensive. The Spanish league is a wealthy league. Let's not forget about this. La Liga is I think the second wealthiest league in the world in football terms after the Premiership. So it has the money. It does have the money to fight this, but I think the damage that could be done. Spanish football's already in a bit of a mess after the World Cup mess with Lopetegui getting sacked and Hierro coming on a short-term thing, and now Luis Enrique taking over. That was badly handled by the federation. The federation clearly, I will finish on this, would have been involved in the talks to set up the deal in the first place, but now they're getting critical of it and turning against the deal that they would have clearly had to be involved in to get to this stage. They govern the game in Spain. And the players' union saying they weren't consulted is deeply worrying. And the fact that now a club manager has come out and said he supports the players when he's employed by one of the biggest clubs in the world says something that there's a disconnect between the employer and the employees. So yes, I can see a strike on more than just this issue. I think there's a lot of issues in club football that are going on that we don't know about. And it's not just Spanish football. I think it's across the board. I think there's a lot of issues going on. Very similar to the NHL, very similar to Major League Baseball in the 90s. There's a lot going on that we are not aware of. I think this player strike or this threat of a player strike will have serious effects. If La Liga, which I do believe they will, because of the contract they've signed, push ahead, there's going to be a battle between the players' union and the league. They have said we will strike if need be, and I think if because they haven't been consulted, and La Liga, when they've been questioned on this, the La Liga representatives, the president of La Liga was interviewed, and he said, "We're not releasing the details of a time, place, and who's playing." I can only see a couple of Spanish clubs really having the appeal to play in the US, and that is Atletico Madrid, Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Athletic Bilbao, possibly Valencia. Maybe Sevilla at a push. Celta Vigo have only recently got back into Europe. Espanyol aren't the force they were in the 80s and 90s. They're not as good as they used to be. And Levante are just the other team that now have been relegated from La Liga. They don't have the same appeal to worldwide fans. So that's the issue there. So only a few big clubs are going to really get a lot of money out of this. The teams like Girona and Getafe and Real Sociedad and Real Betis will not draw the crowds. I can see half-empty stadiums for this. I can see the ticket price being exceptionally high, and I can only see a few clubs benefiting. But the fact that La Liga have agreed to this means that all the clubs involved in the top two tiers of Spanish football have agreed to this proposal. Because again, promotion relegation system, very similar, obviously almost identical to the Premier League, 3 up, 3 down. You know, you've got to get the top two leagues in Spanish football on board. I think you've got to get every Spanish club actually on board, because you could have a club that gets promoted up several divisions and ends up in La Liga while this deal was in place, that would have to play a game in the US. I think La Liga have underestimated the players' union. I think the clubs have underestimated their players, and the knock-on effect could have ramifications outside of La Liga, the Champions League, the Europa League, international break. If the Spanish players based in Spain go on strike during the international break, how do they select a team? Is there enough Spanish players of decent enough quality to put a team out on the field during, let's say, a European qualifier or the friendly or the old international series games they've got now? Spain want to qualify for the next international tournament and repair the damage from the World Cup. So if the Spanish players go on strike, those Spanish-based players in the AFE union, not the Professional Players Union, which is the PFA, which is over here, in England, what team can they put on the field? Because that will affect the knock-on effect is going to be massive, and then it's going to have an effect with other leagues. Look at the Spanish Players Union and go, right, we have concerns in our league with it being racism or homophobia, or there's issues with we're not happy with the ticket price anymore, or agents' fees, or whatever it may be, or fees from merchandise sales, because your name print on the back of a shirt, that player gets a percentage of how many shirts with his name print on the back he gets. There's going to be all that kind of goings on. It's happened in other professional sports leagues and other sports. That's going to be a knock-on effect. Anyway, it's 9:30 here UK time, so I don't know where everyone is around the world, but I've gone on an extra 10 minutes longer than I thought I would. But no, I had to end on the deal. Sorry, with La Liga wanting to play in the US. I think La Liga are going to try and force this through, and I think we are going to have a battle. How long the strike lasts, if it does happen, because again, we don't know what the next meeting in September is going to hold in a month's time between the league and the players. We don't have a clue, and it'd be wrong of us to speculate. But I do think a strike is on the cards. I have no doubts on that. The MLS owners themselves will have to be against this, because that damages their brand in the US, because they are the weaker brand. No doubt on that. They are the weaker league, and they're trying to grow that league. So you invite the big boys over to take all your fans off you and all their money, so they don't spend money on your jerseys, on your tickets, on your games, on watching on TV. Yeah, the MLS won't be happy with this. I wouldn't be surprised if the two federations of US soccer and the Spanish FA have had something to do with this kind of agreement, and now they're realising they wish they hadn't. The way that it's seen abroad about Americans, that they like to ram stuff down our throats and they're arrogant, I don't think it's going to help with the perception of what American business and American sport is about. So we'll have to see what happens, but I'm going to leave that there. It's a very interesting point to leave on. I only thought I'd do a little live stream, fill in a gap in time. I had a bit of spare time, so I thought I would, have a little live stream tonight. And there's been some interesting questions, and yeah, I'm more than happy to look at doing a roundup of various football leagues around the country and around Europe, if I can over the weekend. But yeah, I'm happy with my Mob Team Blackburn are doing. Really happy actually, and I'm looking at the Premier League, and then of course, because the bank holiday weekend, there's games on Monday as well. So we'll have to see what happens there, and of course the Challenge Cup final, the future of where they play the final, we won't know for at least another few years after until the Wembley contract expires what really happens. It would be nice for it to go on tour around the country, and into France as well, because obviously Catalan and Toulouse play in the Super League system in the Championship. So it'd be nice to see maybe get played in France and try and grow the game there. Um, and we'll have to see what happens. But thank you very much for watching. Anyone new, anyone popped across this, get your friends to subscribe if you can. Yeah, I'll have some more videos for you tomorrow, and I'll have some more live streams for you tomorrow, and I'll see you soon. Thanks.